This is why Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, because every human government has always ended up with a few ruling elites exploiting the masses. An aristocracy. Ancient Egyptians with their pharaohs, China with their emperors and empresses, Japan with the shoguns leading to its emperor, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the nation states of Europe, the papal powers, all of these are ruling aristocracies exploiting the masses. When the U.S. government was set up, it was specifically set up by enlightened people that understood this problem and put into the founding documents a system that was designed to diffuse power away from ruling elites into the hands of the mass, so the mass of people would hold the power in order to prevent this satanic type of domination, control, and exploitation. Decentralization of power to three branches: legislative, executive, judicial. The Congress was limited in its ability to remove a president except for specific crimes that were specified in the documents, because the founders did not want the United States to have a parliament in which the prime minister serves at the behest of the parliament and can be recalled at any moment. They wanted him to actually be empowered to act and have power to spread the power into the different branches.
Co-equal branch.
Co-equal branches, yeah.
The executive branch.
An electoral college rather than a simple majority vote, in order to, again, to decentralize power away from simply let's get 51% of the people. And as soon as it's a simple majority, then the minority will always end up being trampled upon, and it was designed to protect from that. Separation of church and state, because of seeing the abuses of the merging of those two organizations and trying to enforce religious dogmas on people violated the law of liberty and hurt people, so they didn't want that. The right of the citizenry to bear arms, purposely written into the Constitution, not primarily to protect from the grizzly bear or the robber, but to protect from an abusive government.
Tyrannical government.
A tyrannical government was designed to limit the power of the government, to give power to the people to resist the government. That was the purpose of that article.
And to put teeth into the First Amendment, the free speech and free press.
That's right.
And freedom of religion.
The right to a free and independent press, you just mentioned, which was intended to investigate and expose corruption in government. Its primary purpose was to expose government corruption and inform the people of it, so the people, through their power of the vote, could remove corrupt officials and put in other officials. This was its purpose. The right to privacy, including no search and seizure without warrant, giving the citizenry more power, privacy, and limiting the power of the government. The right to not self-incriminate, that if the government asks you a question, you're not obligated to answer that question. If it incriminates you, you can. The government has the burden to actually demonstrate and prove any type of crime against you.
Presumption of innocence.
Presumption of innocence. An educated citizenry was one of the expectations when the founding documents were put, that the people would be informed and educated so they can make informed, intelligent decisions. Requirement of the elections every 2 years for the House and 6 for the Senate and 4 for the President to turn over and replace, so there wouldn't be an established lifelong aristocracy of politicians. Okay, and then high hurdles to change the system. Now, if we believe in the biblical worldview, then we anticipate that the U.S. Constitution, with its protections of liberty and the diffusion of power into the hands of the people and the masses, will be attacked and will be eroded, and eventually a aristocracy or a ruling authority will take charge in America and the world, which will persecute and abuse people of conscience. That is an inevitability. In order to get there, the Constitution has to be undermined. Now, what I'm about to do is I'm going to list some examples of how the U.S. Constitution and the protections of liberty are being eroded, and I want you to observe a method of Satan. One of Satan's method. Identify it, see it, look for it. And this is one of his strategies. He, the source of evil, will inspire some abuse, some evil in society, in a group, and then use the outrage against that evil to bring a solution to stop that evil that actually undermines liberties and takes away constitutional freedoms. This is a strategy. Let's do something wrong, and let's get people's response, and they won't even see. They think they're doing good when they're actually setting up for a totalitarian state. And this has been going on ever since the inception of the Constitution. The Civil War in the United States strengthened the federal government and weakened states' rights. That's what happened.
But it was to address a specific evil.
Despite its positive effect of eliminating slavery. Slavery is evil. Civil War got rid of that evil, but simultaneously diminished state liberties and increased the power of the federal government. Ever-increasing gun regulations, making law-abiding citizens more dependent and vulnerable to the state. Despite the intended positive goal to reduce gun violence in society. We have gun violence and evil in society. Let's do something to stop it. And what do? We'll take away liberties of law-abiding citizens in order to do it. The movement of media organizations toward promoting certain agendas rather than presenting facts. Despite their goal of wanting to improve society, they may believe that this agenda is going to make a better society. Their goal might be to prevent global warming or something, okay? So they may have an altruism, but they have corrupted themselves. Because without objective facts, the citizenry is misinformed and therefore cannot make appropriate decisions for who they want to represent them. The erosion of the right of privacy, the FISA courts, the Patriot Act, ever-increasing camera monitoring in America where you are constantly being surveilled and monitored, and massive computers are constantly assessing and digitizing, and our electronic monitoring, our email monitoring, our online activities, our telephone monitoring, so much monitoring constantly going on, despite the goal to protect us from terrorism. Terrorism and evil. Let's respond to that. And what do? We respond by moving further and further into your privacy and taking your privacy.
We've gone so far down that road that people are voluntarily giving it. Here's my social media information.
Yep.
Here's my opinion on everything.
I'm just pointing out a process, folks, because this is an inevitability. If you believe Scripture, this is an inevitable path that's going to happen. Federal income tax, which was not in the Constitution. In fact, it was against the founders. They didn't want that. Which shifts economic power from the individuals to the federal government and from the states to the federal government. Despite the goal to protect the nation from foreign powers or provide social services. Uncoupling the dollar from the gold standard and the creation of the Federal Reserve, which further moves economic power away from people, devaluing the dollars and the savings that you have, giving power to the one who has the printing press and can print it whenever they need it, despite the stated goal to stabilize the economy. Huge government bureaucracies with layers of regulations and restrictions that restrict freedom and liberty, despite the goal to protect from abuse and exploitation, like pollution and other types of abuse and exploitation. Yeah. That's just one example, but many types of things. Like when I grew up, we drove around in cars with the kids just standing in the middle seat on the front seat on a bench seat.
That's right.
I mean, come on. That's how we grew up. I don't know. We shouldn't have that. We should all be dead. It's not possible to survive unless you have a child restraint seat and some, nanny state monitoring everything you do.
It's true.
But, again, good goal. Kids are protected. That's a good goal. But what happens, we pass laws and regulations that restrict the freedoms to make decisions. Government determination of what businesses are essential and what are not essential during the COVID pandemic, despite the goal of protecting citizens from disease and death.
The stated goal.
The stated goal, yeah. That is the goal that justified it. Yeah, some may have other goals. Mm-hmm. So did you notice that every one of these erosions of liberties and freedoms was to move against some evil? I want to sensitize you to be discerning, to watch things that are happening in our world and our society. The mindset, how about this? The mindset of an ever-increasing social progressives and all socialism governments and communist governments throughout history always present some evil. poverty, economic equality, the inability to afford education, something that's wrong that we need to fix it. And yet their solutions always end up with a ruling elite. The communist governments, look at those governments, folks. Those are a ruling elite. Socialist governments. And this always happens because they take freedoms in order to enforce their utopian understanding. False narratives of a controlling God who restricts liberty in these false narratives in Christianity. See, some Christians will do the same thing. They see what they perceive as an evil. Abortion. Homosexual marriage. Let's get a hold of government and let's force people to comply to our understanding of good. Let's stop this evil. It's the same satanic system of control. And that's the trick of the devil. God's methods, truth, presented in love. We convert. We don't coerce. Question.
Yes, from Gary. Do you agree that a distortion is that the mark of the beast is the day of worship, whereas reality is that the mark is one's understanding of the character of God and how he governs the universe? And other people have commented that these are beastly, like what you're talking about are beastly.
So what's beastly is coercion. That's what's beastly. If you read historic Adventist documents, the historic documents talk about Sunday becoming a mark of the beast when it's enforced by government under threat of imprisonment. So it actually is not about the day. It is about the method used to force it upon people that's beastly. And so if, in fact, the government was controlled by Jewish people or Adventist people and we began passing laws to imprison people who didn't close their businesses on the Saturday Sabbath, that would be equally beastly. So what happens when we have concrete literalism that we talked about earlier is people hear that this day can be used in this way and thus become a mark of the beast. Imperialism, remember the day became a day of worship by legislation. Thus it represents imperialism, and imperialism is always enforced by coercion, and that's when it becomes the beastly system, when it coerces people. Okay, but people get very literal and they don't understand the actual function of God's principles of truth and love, and they don't understand the function of Satan's government of coercion and imperialism, and so they just want the day. Well, if you go to church on that day, you got the mark. No, you don't. That's not it. It's methods that we use and how we treat other people, and thus that day can potentially become that mark of that of the beastly system if it's ultimately used to coerce and a force of coercion. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one more.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's from Kimberly. What would you say to someone who asks why we believe some parts of the Bible have been translated inaccurately through a penal law lens, but other parts that reflect design law have been rendered accurately?
So I would first say, tell me what parts you give me the examples of the parts that you think.
Right.
I will tell you, historically, all Bible translators, I would say, start with the translators. Start with the people who did the translation. How many Bibles were translated before Constantine converted? None. Okay? It's Constantine converted, and the entire Christian world, and Paul prophesied that this was going to happen in Thessalonians, that this man of lawlessness was going to rise, and he was going to set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. He's telling us lawlessness against God's design laws, and thus the church accepted imperialism. And after this became embedded, understood, assumed orthodoxy, then translations came along. How many translators, and you should go back and just simply ask, how many translators, and you can inquire if they're still alive, how do you believe God's law functions? You will find that the people that translated believe God's law functions like human law. It's a system of rules he has to enforce, and that's what justice looks like. And so it is inevitable, it's unavoidable that this type of distortion gets translated over. So I would just simply say that's what it reveals. That's fact. That's reality. It's not some part. It's the entire Scripture gets done that way.